Hello everyone, and welcome to the Angry Sun Zone. This week we've got some games we've been playing recently, including some games that we've finished and seen the ending of. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the podcast, where we discuss game endings and some things we like about them, things we dislike, and a few examples. But before that, we're going to get in on some games we've been playing recently. And so, as always, I'm Alex.
I'm Sato.
And I'm Matt.
And I'll start us off with a game I've been playing recently that arguably I've been playing for many years, which is Tetris. Specifically, Tetris Effect. Connected. I don't know if the connected part is actually a meaningful moniker. I think it might be just what they tacked on when they finally added multiplayer.
Yes, that is the meaning.
Yeah, so I really liked Tetris Effect, and it's Tetris. I've always liked Tetris. Tetris is a hard puzzle game to beat. It's one of the classics for a reason.
Yeah, I'd go so far as to say Tetris is one of the few games I would say is a perfect game. Like, I can't imagine, like, the core of that game being any better than what it is. It's just, it is what it is, and it's perfect. Yeah, like it's such a tight feedback loop. Like, it can get as difficult as you want it to be. It can be relaxing. It can be intense. You know, it can be kind of it fulfills a vast spectrum of like what you actually want out of a puzzle game. It can be played single player or multiplayer too.
Yeah, I played both in Tetris Effect Connected. I really like the music in Tetris Effect. That's probably, I think, the main thing they were going for with this particular edition. Big music and big particle effects. And the music's really actually well done because each stage has the music change as you go through it, in particular in the single player journey mode. And it's basically a series of stages with differing difficulties, and the difficulty might change throughout the stage. So the stage might start out kind of slow speed, and the music starts slow, and then the music gets intense, and the speed of the blocks falling increases, and then it might slow back down after the game has like pushed you into stacking up a massive stack of tetrominoes that you can't actually clear very easily, and then it brings it back, dials it back down, and you're able to kind of clear it out and move to the next stage. But the way that the music has been made is in a way where the sound effects of rotating blocks and dropping blocks and etc., like rotating, dropping, and just moving left and right, all have like a slightly different sound effect, and the sound effect is matching the music of the stage, and it's a really cool sort of touch. My favorite stage is this space-themed stage. You start out inside like what looks like to be an airlock on a space station or something like that, and then you move out into like a space station overlooking a planet, probably Earth, I don't know. And then the space station slowly is constructed over the course of you clearing lines on this stage. And every time you reach a line clear marker that changes the sort of difficulty rating of the stage, it also changes the music slightly and the background and particle effects and all this stuff. And it comes together in kind of a cool package. It's still Tetris. Like, the game is not any different than basically Tetris has been for a while now. There's some additional quality of life features, like there's a block. You get to see the next 4 blocks. You get to hold a block. It's got a new mechanic called the zone mechanic, where you build a meter, and when you activate it, you pause the game briefly, and cleared lines go to the bottom of the stage. And you can get bigger multiplicative bonuses, basically, while in this mode, because you can clear all the way up to every single line of the stage in a single like zone mechanic trigger. So that I think they call it like a perfectress.
that's good.
So like, you know, classic Tetris, you know, you get a Tetris that's you cleared 4 lines at once. But now it goes all the way up. And so you can get like an Octorus, which is clearing 8 lines at once. Or, you know, again, all the way up to clearing every single line on the stage at once, effectively. Very difficult. I haven't actually been able to do that yet. But it's kind of a cool... It's a cool little addition. I don't think that has been in any previous ones. It's ultimately a fairly minor tweak to the formula, though. Except in multiplayer, where when you trigger this zone mode, you actually attack your enemy or your opponent. You attack your opponent in, like, you know, Tetris Attack, where lines go on their side of the field, and you are able to send more lines to their side of the field when you clear lines using the zone mechanic in one of the multiplayer modes. They also have a more classic multiplayer mode that's just score-based as well. So they've got a few different modes in multiplayer, and they've got a bunch of different single-player modes. There's some weird modes like Master Tetris, where the blocks spawn at the height of your highest line on the field.
What?
It's pretty weird. It's super hard.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to actually really move the blocks into the right position. And like the block might spawn in a place where you literally cannot move it to the other side of your field.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy, and I see why they call it Master Tetris. Because it's basically at that point just a reaction time game of the game has just dealt me a terrible play position. How do I like rotate this block into position? Mm-hmm. Like that, it basically makes the entire game about just the rotation mechanic abuse.
Yeah,
which is kind of funny.
It's the T-spin game.
Yeah, basically, it just turns it into T-spin game. So it's pretty cool. It's Tetris with fancy graphics and cool sound effects and cool music, basically. The only thing that the game does not have that I'm kind of surprised it didn't have, or maybe it does and it's just like a secret, is a level with the classic Tetris theme. Any of them.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it had a remix of any of those classic themes.
Yeah, and it doesn't. And I'm really kind of disappointed just because it is Tetris and the Tetris theme's so iconic that a Tetris game without it feels like just wrong.
Right.
Like the music is great, but I'm very surprised. I was really expecting like maybe the final level in the journey mode to have like a little bit of a classic Tetris theme remix at least, if not the OG. But like I said, it's possible that there is a level with the classic Tetris theme in it that is actually like an Easter egg kind of unlock. I don't actually know because the game has so much content. Like it's got a lot of like weird modes and it's got a lot of unlocks and achievements. And frankly, I'm not actually that good at Tetris. Like it's fun. I like it. But I'm really not that good. I was able to beat the, journey mode on normal difficulty, but I probably could not beat it on hard without, frankly, more practice than I'm willing to put into it. And I tried playing online and I just get roasted. I can occasionally online. It's best of 3, so first to 2 wins, and sometimes I'll get 1 win out of the 3 games. I've occasionally won a match, but like the last time I tried playing, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna play until I get 1 win, and I played for like an hour. And keep in mind, a Tetris Attack match is usually only a couple of minutes.
Right.
It doesn't last very long because typically, one person just gets a bunch of line attacks on the other person that they can't clear. And it doesn't really, unless you have like really good players that are actually able to tamp that down, which I'm not. So in the lower ranks, I think people just lose pretty quickly, one person or the other. And it does not, I went like an hour or 2 hours without a single like match win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that.
And I kept ranking down, and there just aren't enough people in the matchmaking to like have a stable sort of ranking system. So sometimes I would be getting matched with players that are like double my rank. And it's like,
Grandmasters.
wow, yeah. So anyway, overall though, great. It's a fun try. I tried it because it was on Xbox Game Pass, and it's definitely worth trying if you like Tetris and you have that. Not sure if it's worth buying unless you really like Tetris. If you've never played Tetris, you should definitely play Tetris. It doesn't matter which version you play; they're all basically the same core concept.
Mm-hmm. If you've got Nintendo Switch Online, you've got Tetris 99 for free.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that when I used my free month. I'm pissed because I love Tetris.
I've managed one win in my Tetris 99 career. It's not easy, and I can only imagine now it's like just all pros left at this point.
Well, I think in Tetris 99 they added like another hopper for like hard mode.
Right,
to try and get around
Once
that.
you get a win, you do unlock another mode that's only for people who have gotten a win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's worth mentioning that the Tetris Effect is directed by Tetsuya Mizuguchi, and his previous works include Rez, Child of Eden, and Lumines, and Meteos. So he's got like a lot of experience with puzzly stuff and kind of like audio-visual experiences. So
could it be the highest budget Tetris game?
I wouldn't be surprised, simply because the amount of like graphical and musical art assets in the game, it's quite a lot. I mean, there's probably like 36 different levels, and they all have a soundtrack. Some of them have vocal soundtracks as well. And again, each soundtrack actually has a progression of, I'd say, at least 3 to 4 different, like, kind of, like the music ensemble sort of like comes in slowly to match the progression of the level as you're clearing lines and the difficulty changes. So I would not be surprised if it's the highest budget Tetris game. If only because a normal Tetris game is so hilariously low budget that, one person could make it. I think the original Tetris was literally just one guy.
yeah.
And fundamentally, the formula is the same. Because, like Santos said, the game's perfect. You can't really improve on it.
You can just tweak it a little bit.
And most of the tweaks to Tetris over the years have really just been to make it a little bit easier and more forgiving.
Well, there was also Tetris DS, and that had a bunch of different modes in it, like the touch mode, which was kind of its own thing. The push one, competitive one, where like you shared the same base, and like as you cleared lines, the base went closer to the other person's side, and it was just like one gigantic well. Like that one was really cool.
That's kind of cool. I think I remembered that.
And there's also Puyo Puyo Tetris, which merges Puyo Puyo and Tetris, and that gets weird.
Oh, actually, there was one other mode I didn't mention, a multiplayer mode called Tetris Connected or something, or maybe it's just Connected mode. And the way that works is that it's sort of cooperative against an AI. So it's 3v1, so 3 players online versus an AI. And the AI is like a boss per se that has special ability triggers. So it'll like make your blocks drop, or it'll make your blocks frozen, so you like can't rotate them, or various other sort of interesting sort of tweaks for like a couple of line drops. And the other thing though is that when everyone's shared zone meter builds up, the 3 players that are on the same team, their Tetris fields link up into one Tetris field, and then your goal is to clear shared lines across all 3 fields.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and it's it's a pretty cool mode. It's, I would say, probably more fun if you were playing with friends, but I don't know. I haven't tried that yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was just playing with randos online, but it was kind of it was a cool mode. I'd recommend trying it if you end up picking up Tetris Effect. Also, since it's cooperative, you don't have to worry about getting completely dominated in online multiplayer.
All right, so you cleared that. Been playing anything else?
Yeah, I've also been playing Tunic, and Tunic is a lot of fun. I really like Tunic. I would recommend it, but I would recommend it with a bit of a caveat that I think Tunic is for a very specific audience. Specifically, Tunic is basically a Zelda game. And then with a bit of Dark Souls inspiration as well. They've cribbed a few sort of aesthetic choices directly from Dark Souls, like your save points or campfires. Mm-hmm. And you have to like ring some tower bells, which apparently is a Dark Souls. Like literally the first mission in Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And it's the first thing you are not quite told, but kind of told to do in Tunic.
Well, you're the same thing in Dark Souls.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing about Tunic is that Tunic is basically trying to ape the experience of playing like an older 2D top-down Zelda game as it sort of would have been at the time. So what does that mean? Well, it means there's an instruction manual, right? And you actually like find pages of it as you progress through the game. And a big part of the game of Tunic is actually just figuring out how to play Tunic. And it doesn't explain itself, really. Like it sort of vaguely gestures in the direction of what you're supposed to do, as a lot of older games in this sort of top-down kind of action game era did. And the game is definitely unfair. Like, the game pulls tricks that, frankly, if you have not beaten a 2D Zelda game, I don't actually think you should play Tunic. Because Tunic is a game that expects you to know the genre conventions, and it kind of plays with them a little bit to mess with the player. And the reason it's doing this is because if you're someone like me who's played a bunch of 2D Zelda games, if I go in and play a 2D Zelda game, I already know exactly what to do. I'm not confused. But because of that, there's something missing there, right? Like the first time I played A Link to the Past, I just sort of like roamed the overworld many times with unclear directions, not quite sure of what to do. And that's not going to happen to me anymore because I know exactly how the formula of a Zelda game works. But it happened to me in Tunic, right? And so Tunic is basically trying to rekindle the feeling of, oh God, I have no idea where to go in this Zelda game. Basically. Like that's what I would describe it as trying to do. And it's really going hard on that sort of like nostalgia for a time when you didn't understand the game mechanics. Mm-hmm. And it's going for that like enjoyment of the discovery of how to play this game and what this game is doing. And that is going to be incredibly frustrating and frankly, like not fun for someone who is not like well versed in the particular niche that this game is in. Also, the boss fights are ridiculously tough. Like ridiculous. There's some of the bosses are unfair. And there's one boss in particular I probably died to a dozen times before I figured out what I was supposed to do. And I mean, it's fun in a particular way, and it's not going to be for everyone. So I give Tunic like a big thumbs up if you really loved old school Zelda games and think that like newer school Zelda games are a bit too straightforward.
Right.
Like that's who this game is for. And I think that this game got like huge hype in the gaming press. And the reason it got huge hype in the gaming press is because the people who write the gaming press are exactly in this, like the target audience for Tunic.
Yeah, people who play arguably too many games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people who have played way too many video games for way too many years and know all of the genre conventions and tricks and like exactly how to look at like a tiny, like few pixels of slightly different level geometry and know there's something in there. I need to go there.
Yeah.
And that's what this game does, right? This game has tons of hidden secrets all over the place, many of which are mandatory to actually continue in the game. And if you are not good at finding them, you're just going to get stuck and it's just going to be annoying. But if you are good at like recognizing those things, it's an incredibly rewarding game to play. So I give it a big thumbs up with the sort of caveat that other people are going to think that this is a terrible game and they won't understand why anyone likes it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've been like half meaning to play it, half not, just because of that, like discovery aspect that sounds super interesting. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to play it just because I've got too much stuff on my plate. But yeah, it's a very unique game, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's also a bit freeform in that there are some major quote-unquote dungeons. They're not really marked as dungeons or identified as such, but they definitely are in the sense of a Zelda game. And they can be, I think, done in any order. Although it's kind of hard to tell. I'd have to probably replay the game a couple times to really figure out that, like, for sure. But hilariously, I think I actually beat most of the game without a single ranged item, and there are actually quite a few.
Oh.
And it was funny because I was like, man, this game doesn't have, like, any ranged equipment. I'm like, Zelda games usually do. I'm surprised. And then I'm like near the end and I'm like, wait, I'm getting all these ranged items all of a sudden. What the heck's going on? And some of them I realized I could have gotten way sooner and was probably supposed to. But that's kind of one of the things that you get with a game that you can complete in a variety of sequences, is that sometimes some players just have like a strange experience where they don't have something that they probably should. But you can beat the game without having those particular items at those particular times. It just makes it more difficult.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm actually like I have an idea. I actually have an idea for like a Tunic run, and I'll just spoil this one item because it's literally the very first item you pick up, and you pick it up right at the beginning. It's a stick. So your first weapon, it's just a stick, a piece of branch, right? It's not a good weapon. But I think you can beat the whole game with no actual combat weapon other than the stick. It would just be very difficult. I'm tempted to try though.
All right, you got to create a new speedrun category for Tunic, stick percent.
Stick percent, yeah. That's about the only thing I'll say like concrete about the game though, just because like the exploratory and discovery aspect of the game, figuring out how the game works, really is kind of a big part of the game.
Yeah. Makes the game extremely difficult to talk about.
It does, yeah.
But at the same time, that if you're playing it at the same time as somebody else, and you can't go like, oh, did you do this? Oh, did you do that? And people might be like, no way, you can do that? I had no fucking idea.
Yeah. Another thing I'll say about Tunic is that if you're the kind of player that gets frustrated with a game and then goes and looks stuff up on Wiki, it's probably not like a game you're going to enjoy, to be honest, because that's not really in the spirit of what the game is trying to do. Like, if you just look everything up on Wiki, the game's probably trivial.
I mean, yeah, like, we looked up some of the speedrun percent times, and they're just, like, 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
And, like insanely short. But the meat of the game is finding out stuff.
Yeah. It's a game that, like, reveals itself to you in cryptic pieces. Small cryptic pieces, one at a time. Like I said, one of the major mechanics of the game, and again, this isn't really a spoiler because like literally it happens right at the beginning, is that you find pages of the instruction manual that tell you how to play the game throughout the game. And I realized that I missed some pages like right at the beginning that were actually like sort of they're not like critical, but like they definitely would have helped me kind of progress a little bit if I hadn't have missed them. So yeah. Like, it's not a game that I think you would enjoy if your first instinct upon getting stuck is to look things up on Wiki. There's some games where that's totally appropriate. Dwarf Fortress, don't.
Yep, perfect.
Don't. Like, do not play Dwarf Fortress without, like, the wiki at hand. And probably a tutorial. Because that game is not about... That game, like, just, like, knowing stuff is, like, you need to... Like, there's just too many mechanics. Like, anyway. So, yeah, that's kind of some thoughts on Tunic. I really like it. Recommended if you're in that particular audience.
Nice.
Of people who played too many games, Zelda games in particular. and maybe Dark Souls. I don't know. I haven't really played much Dark Souls, and I don't think that knowing Dark Souls is actually necessary at all. But I think having played some Zelda games is necessary to appreciate Tunic, like the 2D ones in particular, because it cribs pretty hard from those genre conventions.
All right. So, Matt, what you been playing?
I've been playing a couple things. I did a replay of Legends Arceus. All for one Pokemon for my living decks.
Oh, wow.
What?
It's a new legendary that they had added, and it has 2 forms. And I go all out with my living decks in that if I can have both forms in the living decks, I will. So I had to do a full replay of that just to get a second of that legendary.
Oh, wow.
And I gotta say, that game doesn't have much replayability-wise.
Yeah, it's pretty empty, eh?
Yeah, and on replay, when you're not like worried about catching like a bunch of stuff and just filling out the Pokedex and everything, it's not good on replay.
Yeah, like it's got a big kind of open world, but there's nothing really in the open world other than this particular Pokemon lives in this particular area of this particular map. That's like really all there is in the overworld.
Yeah.
And so if you're playing the game through the first time and you want to collect a bunch of Pokemon, that works fine. But yeah, playing it again, it's just like, that's not great. And like for a traditional Pokemon game that's more focused on the battling, like replaying the game with a completely different team, there's value in that.
Yeah. And that's actually something I tried to do in this. I played with a team of mostly Pokemon I haven't used before. Well, aside from my starter, which I went with Rowlet. But I used some other Pokemon I hadn't used before, like Rapidash.
Did you use the shiny Rapidash?
Yes.
Hell yeah. I've got the shiny Rapidash on my team. I haven't finished Arceus.
I used a Probopass. I used the Hisuian Zoroark, which I really like the typing on that of Ghost Normal. It's only weak to Dark, and it's resistant. It just, there's 3 types that just do nothing to it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I whenever I replay, I always like try using Pokemon I haven't used before. So aside from that, I started Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Part 1?
Yes, part 1.
How many parts is it going to have anyway? Do we actually know?
I think 3?
Yeah, I think 3. I don't know that they've confirmed it, but I think 3 might be right.
Yeah.
Oh, that means the stopping points aren't going to be the same as the disc switch out.
Well, they're not going to be the same. Well, Final Fantasy VII had 3 discs.
Oh, it did?
It did. 8 had 4 discs.
Okay. For some reason, I thought 7 only had 2 discs.
Oh. Well, that's the thing. 7 kind of only had 2 discs because the last disc was mainly like some of the endgame. I think it was mainly like some of the endgame like side quests and like the last dungeon. Like there wasn't actually that much on the final disc. But, so, I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't played too much of it yet, but it's a nice looking game. It looks great, and I'm really enjoying the combat so far. I like being able to switch and play as the other members in your party, which is something I thought that the Square Enix Guardians of the Galaxy game was really missing. The fact that it locked you into only Star-Lord, and that you couldn't switch and play as the other Guardians, I thought that was a bit of a letdown. But
It's called Guardians of the Galaxy, not Guardian of the Galaxy.
But yeah, being able to switch and play as the other characters is nice. So far, I've only been able to play as a little bit of Barrett and Tifa, aside from Cloud.
Well, Tifa's always relevant.
Especially in Italy.
Yeah.
I like the combat. It's pretty simple. You only have one attack button, really. X. Mm-hmm. Or, well, I'm playing on a Xbox controller, but you do have...
Is the PS4 and the Xbox controller X the same?
No.
Missed opportunity.
PlayStation X is A.
No, PlayStation X is cross.
Right.
They're very particular about that.
Yeah, they are.
Did they get sued or something?
They've trademarked that collection of shapes, I'm pretty sure.
That's ridiculous.
But the combat, it does something that I like when you bring up your menu to cast any spells or abilities. The game slows down a lot, which is something I struggled with a lot when I was playing the only Kingdom Hearts game I've played, Kingdom Hearts 1. I have a hard time balancing combat while also trying to navigate the menus for spells while battle's still going on.
Yeah, well, it's all real time.
Yeah. So the slowdown is really nice for me. It helps me out. Yeah, I'll go more into it when I finish it. Although I don't know how much into it I'll go, because I know you want to play it, Santo.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's Final Fantasy VII. You've played Final Fantasy VII.
Well, they've made some changes, I know that much.
Yes, they have.
And I still don't know when Remake Part 1 ends, like what point in the story it ends at. So that's something I don't want to know until I play it.
Right.
Because I don't want to see it coming. Right? Because I know all the story beats, so if I know, okay, this specific story beat is when the game ends, I'll know exactly how far I am through in the entire game.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know,
Yeah.
I'd rather that just be a surprise. Mostly so I can probably get angry at it.
So it's okay, you know. Just don't level Aerith. Or Aeris. I still don't know which it's supposed to be.
It's whatever. It's whatever. Doesn't matter.
But as someone who's only played a bit of, I guess 20 hours in a bit of Final Fantasy VII, I am enjoying Remake so far.
Nice.
I mean, I didn't actually finish Final Fantasy VII. I played a lot. I did not finish it because that game's just so long.
I finished it not too long after it came out, and then I finished it like a couple years ago. Play through it again.
I got to
Listen, I got to the best scene, which is where Cloud has to dress as a girl to, like, infiltrate the hideout.
I got to where the world opens up, and then I wanted to explore, but I accidentally explored into the plot, and the next thing I knew, I was on like a boat or an airship going across the ocean.
The boat, yep.
Aside from that, something I actually finished is I played Quantum Break.
Oh, wow, okay.
Oh shit!
Which
that's on my like. I think I literally have that downloaded on my desktop, and it's in my Steam want to play folder.
Yeah, I got it recently from the Humble Ukraine relief bundle.
It's been in a lot of Humble bundles.
So it's a basic third-person cover shooter, and it's by it's made by the people behind Alan Wake and Control.
Yeah, Remedy.
And
Alan Wake's another game I have downloaded that I meant to play.
Same. I also have Control downloaded waiting to play that.
I also have Control downloaded waiting to play.
Same.
Simple. It's third-person cover shooter with time-based abilities. And it does something that I actually found pretty interesting. At the end of each act, you make a choice. And that choice kind of affects how... I'm not sure how much it affects it, because I only did one playthrough. I'm tempted to do another playthrough choosing the opposite choices. But from my understanding, it only really affects little aspects of the act to come. Mm-hmm. But after you complete each act and you make that choice, you then get a full 22-minute live-action episode that plays between the acts. And which is why the characters in the game are actually based on the actors that they cast for the little show in between. And it was pretty interesting. I liked seeing that. It's never really been done before in a game.
Weren't they trying to do something similar with Alan Wake?
Alan Wake had like an in-universe TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that.
But like this isn't like this is like direct in Quantum Break. It's directly related to like the story of the game you're playing, right?
Yeah.
It's not like some fictional like in-universe thing. It's
now the character
plot.
The character you play doesn't really show up too much in those live action episodes. It's mostly some side characters that don't really show up in the game, like showing what's going on aside from the plot you're playing through.
Right.
So it helps to expand out what's happening some more. So the game it consists of 5 acts, so you have 4 of those episodes throughout the game. But and I guess we could come back to this a little later. The kind of disappointing thing is your choices. There's only one static end. There's only one ending. So the choices you make only really affect how the act to come plays out a bit, but it doesn't affect the ending of the game.
And Triangle Strategy vibes over here again.
Triangle Strategy had 4 distinct endings, though.
But yeah, no, for being it was an interesting play. Just some fun time-based abilities, like you can freeze enemies, or you can bring up a bubble around yourself that'll just stop bullets or slow down bullets in their track, and you can heal in the bubble. Mm-hmm. Quantum Break. It was at least a fun playthrough. One time, anyways. It's been a while since I played any like third-person cover shooters.
Right. Yeah.
Probably since the last Gears of War I played.
Yeah, and that would have been
Judgment on the 360.
Oh, you actually played Judgment?
Yeah.
The Adventures of Baird.
Yep. I do still at one point want to check out 4 and 5 on PC.
Yeah. We should play that co-op.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah. I do still want to check out Remedy's other games though. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been all meaning to play Control.
Yeah.
We've got it installed.
I finally have a computer that's capable of playing it well. So, because from what I've heard, that game isn't it's a gorgeous looking game, but it's not the most optimized.
Actually, that is one thing about Quantum Break is being it was an early Xbox One title.
Yeah.
And launched on PC at the same time too. But the game's capped at 60. And there's some sections where it drops to 30. Even on like a good modern PC. It's a little jarring sometimes, but
yeah. That was before the glory days of the PC port.
Yep. Now everyone's porting stuff to PC. Mm-hmm. Even Sony.
The Xbox and PlayStation are they're basically PCs with a custom OS now anyway.
Yep.
What about you, Santo? What have you been playing?
I've been playing the hottest sequel
Oh, the Caligula Effect Overdose 2?
Just Caligula Effect 2, because Caligula Effect Overdose was a re-release of the original Caligula Effect. Yeah, this came out in October, and I just got around to playing it now.
Listen, we're catching up, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, when we started this podcast, we were talking about, like, 20-year-old games.
Yeah.
Now it's only, like 6 months.
The backlog is
8
bottomless.
months.
Yeah. By next year,
is bottomless.
by next year, we're going to be talking about games that came out like 3 months after the episode aired.
This is why our games of the year aren't limited to just things that came out that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Game of the Year 2023, it's going to have 2024 releases.
Yeah.
Early access, baby.
That's right. So, the Caligula Effect 2 is basically just a retread of the Caligula Effect 1 that takes place afterwards. It's essentially the exact same setup of there's a Vocaloid, creates this weird like other pocket dimension where people who are having problems in the real world get sent to, and they don't realize they're there, but then your crew does realize they're there, thinks, I mean, yeah, we got our issues, but this is bullshit, let's get the fuck home. And through the help of a friendly Vocaloid, you go through a bunch of dungeons that are just, normal places in the world. Like, you're not going into, like, a cave or some crazy castle. You're going into the planetarium and the mall.
Yeah.
Those are your dungeons. And, so...
I mean, everyone knows the mall is a dangerous and scary place.
Especially depending on which mall you go to.
We'll be going to a mall after this for lunch? Dinner.
Dinner.
Yeah.
Great. Now I'm going to have to release this at, like, afternoonish time so that, like, people listening can be fully immersed in how we're talking about stuff around us.
It's currently 4:23 p.m.
Son of a bitch. I'm going to have to time this, aren't I?
But what if they're listening to it at 4 a.m. like a madman?
Oh, shit. All right, I'm going to have to, like,
Okay, we got
somehow figure out a way for when they play it, somehow inject, like, a 4:20 p.m. like thing in the middle there.
Okay, let's hack the web servers that host our podcast just to fix our podcast to be have dynamic audio synced to the user.
It'll be like that Lady Gaga song that mentions a different state depending on where it was played on the radio.
Oh God,
I didn't know about that.
But, so yeah. So the Vocaloid that's on your team is like what was supposed to be like the next released Vocaloid from the company that made the one that caused all the problems in the first game. And she's pissed because that company got so much bad publicity after the events of the first game that she got canceled. So she was never going to be released to the public. So now she's like, what the fuck? This is bullshit. This other Vocaloid is going to create an even like worse environment. People are going to think this whole thing's happening again because of me. So we got to stop this.
modern commentary on cancel culture or something.
No. So it's pretty much exactly a retread in terms of the gameplay of it. I'll start with what they changed that is good. So they added an actual quest log to the damn game, which they didn't have before, despite having like 400 quests in the game.
Wow.
They just had this web that you had to horribly navigate to try and find stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember pictures of that web.
Yeah.
Like that's cool, but it's not useful if it also
Yeah.
contains all of the already completed quests and stuff and no ordering.
Were there any quests on the dark web?
No. Everything was pretty on the up and up.
If you think about it, the characters are in secret e-prisons, so the entire game is on the dark web.
Yeah, they're on some company's intranet. You need a VPN to get in. So that's good that they we're taking modern game, not even modern game design, like PS2 level game design and adding it into this game. Unfortunately, they did add the PS2 version of a quest system because there's most of the quests they don't have markers on the map to say. So it just says this is the area that they're in, but you still have to go and find the actual NPC. There's no markers there. This game has like the opposite effect of open world games that have icon barf, in that there's not enough icons.
Oh man.
And
okay, so it sounds like this is the best PS2 game released this year.
I mean, yes, actually. There's a lot about this game that feels like a PS2 game. And I kind of like... The first game, I gave it a little bit of a pass because that was a Vita game, so I kind of expected it to be like that. But this game was released on PS4 and Switch, so there's a few things that go on with this game that I think are unforgivable. Like the load times. The load times are awful. And it's an Unreal game, so there's a bunch of pop-in and but like, so like when you travel into an area, it takes a load time that's a bit too long for my tastes, and then like it just like stutters for the first like 5 seconds that you're in that area too. It's really bad.
Well, and I mean, are the graphics substantially different from the first game?
No,
because like they weren't bad, but they weren't particularly, they didn't seem like particularly demanding.
Well, no, the graphics in the first game were bad in that all like the 3D model stuff was extremely basic and copy pasted. All the UI and like character portion stuff looked great because that's, you know, Japanese UI design I think is like the best in the business, like in terms of style and stuff like that. Like just look at a Persona game and I've won the argument.
Persona 5 is fantastic looking AI. Or UI.
Yeah. So, and one other thing is that when you're like traveling to these different sections, they show a minimap of that section, but they don't show any icons on that minimap, even of the ones that you are supposed to be able to see too, which is just, that's also very backwards game design. It's like, okay, which part of this mall am I supposed to go to hand in this goddamn quest? You have to like, I had to like memorize the like, names of each of the individual sections in each the individual subsections on the map. It was kind of old school. The areas are still like really, really big, really, really repetitive. They have a bunch of NPCs that, you know, are the quest givers that are just like kind of walking around, but they also have a bunch of NPCs that aren't. That the only like thing you can tell is that they have like kind of blank, blurred out faces. So that it's really difficult to see sometimes, okay, which of the NPCs are going to give me quests, which aren't. You have to walk up to them close enough to where they get an icon over their head. But I mean, these are kind of nitpicks, honestly. The combat system, okay, it's been simplified a little bit. Previously, you set up your attacks on this timeline. You could set up to 3 at a time. Now you can only set 1 at a time. And one other change is that, like, if you're using an attack instead of like it having a chance to all your hits of that attack miss or all of them hit, it's like, okay, you've got, you know, an 80% chance for any individual attack in this combo to hit. So it doesn't get into the situation where you have as many like intricately planned combos that one of the pieces misses and then you're screwed, where it's just like, okay, I need this launcher to hit, and then I have this like 3 other people on my party doing sick air combos. Like that's fixed. So the combat's a lot more streamlined. I think it's better in this game. And one thing that they did that's awesome is, so in the first game, when you got into combat, there was the theme of the area that you were in, and then they lay on lyrics and like additional instrumentation for when you're in fights. And they set a circular like wall around the arena that you're in that's actually playing like a music video that's synced up to the song. So the battles look really, really cool.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Like it's awesome to just be like trying to set up these combos and beat up these like weird corrupted people while statues of David are falling in the background. It's like all this vaporwave shit. Let's go. So the music was the most disappointing part of the game for me. And it's not because the music's bad. The music's actually good. But the problem is that the first game has one of my favorite soundtracks of any game. So I had extremely high expectations for this one. And the music doesnit go as hard, unfortunately.
Did it have someone else doing the music?
It had different vocals, and every song in both the games that are like the main character and area themes are are each of them were composed by different people in both games. So like they got like 12 Vocaloid composers, each doing one track. So like it's and that's the thing, is that in the first game the music was like very, very varied in a lot of cases. In this one, it's not as varied. There's remixes for the bosses that are mostly just like a little bit more high energy and synthy than the original tracks. They're not as they don't explore as many genres, so that was a bit disappointing. But my real problem with the game, and I don't actually think this is a game worth playing, it wasn't worth my time to play, is that it didn't have my favorite story thing from the first game, which is, in the first game there was like a pseudo villain route where you kind of infiltrated all the enemy characters that you were fighting against, and you kind of got to hear their stories and find out why they were there and why they don't want to go back. And it's one thing for like you exploring the relationships between your own party where you all have the same goal in mind. So it's like, okay, yes, this person has this trauma that was in the real world that they're escaping here, and like them coming to terms with it and dealing with it. But for the villains, it's like a lot of the time, like they will come to terms with it, sure, but they still would prefer to be in this, idealized world rather than the real world. So like it was interesting to have that duality in the first game that it just doesn't exist here. And as well, because it doesn't have that kind of like villain route thing, the game has less content than the overdose version, I should say. The overdose version is what added that villain route. It wasn't existing in the first version of the first game. So yeah, overall the game's a bit middling. It doesn't have as much of an identity. It's not as polished as it really should be. There's even like a lot of character animations that are from the first game, which was originally released on the Vita. It's like, come on, this is like, I don't know, like 6 years later on like a completely new platform. Like this, like they should have put more effort into it. It feels more budget than it should. And I have one big rant I gotta do. Okay, so I played this on PS4. I didn't play it on Switch, and the PS4 is a terrible console. It's so bad because they have this function that is really, really good, which is the ability to record footage, where you press a button and it'll record the last half hour or whatever you set it in the console to do. And even though that doesn't work all the time, it's still a great function to have, so you can capture just dumb stuff that happens in your game, like dumb physics stuff, and then you can post online and everybody can laugh at it. It's great.
Yeah.
But one thing that they do is that they allow developers to set sections of their game where you can't record footage. And it pops up a thing in the corner that says footage recording blocked. So obviously the only time they're going to do that is when big important story stuff is happening. So you get spoiled that like a big thing's going to happen in this like cutscene that you don't think that anything like monumental is going to happen, but then it's like, nope, blocked.
Yeah, like I think the entirety of Persona 5 was blocked.
Yeah.
And it's not just for those recordings. Like back at the time when I was playing Persona 5, like I'd be in PlayStation parties with friends, and you can like stream the game for friends in the party to watch. The stream's blocked too.
What?
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. Like, public exhibition is such a weird thing because there have been like, with movies and music, there have already been explicit like laws and stuff against that. But video games kind of got to a point where they never really had that imposed on them, and then streaming got very big. And so now like companies are like trying to fight against that in a way that feels like, it's corporation, so it feels really shitty.
Actually, a little aside from this, I remember in an earlier episode, I can't remember what we were talking about. I did say that Japan doesn't have copyright law. I misspoke there. I meant to say fair use isn't a thing in Japan.
Oh.
They have copyright law, but fair use is not a thing.
No, their copyright law is actually even more strict than what we'd be more familiar with in English-speaking countries.
Yeah, so yeah, that's it frustrated me and took me out of the game where I wasn't even all that into the game, so I didn't need to be taken out even further there.
Overall, it sounds like kind of a disappointment that it's adding nothing new. There was a couple small quality of life tweaks, but then the actual core stuff was kind of worse.
Yeah, this is a better playing game, but it's a less interesting game, which is frustrating. So if somebody said oh, which one you would recommend, I'd just say neither. Play something else. This is better use of your time.
Is it the same player character, or is it a new cast?
It's a new cast.
Well, the other thing I remember that you were raving about with the Caligula Effect overdose was really sort of just the writing. So how do you think the writing compares? Is that also just sort of worse and middling, or?
Some of the characters are written fairly well, but there are other characters that, I don't know if this is a writing problem more than just a design problem, but some of your player characters are not very likable at all, which is a problem. In the first game, I felt like pretty much everybody was pretty likable, except for the one person that explicitly was very much meant not to be likable. But in this game, there's a couple that are just you fucking suck. Come on. One of them is in the real world, they're a member of the intellectual elite. They're a prodigy or whatever, a savant.
Okay.
And they just kind of lord that over everybody and talk down to everybody in your party. And it's just come the fuck on. We're trying to accomplish the same thing here. Can you fucking cool it for a millisecond? And then there's one other character in your party that is seconds away from being an incel. He sucks. He's just constantly just hitting on every woman he sees, but is also constantly super angry. And his character arc that you go through, there's character stories, kind of the social links in Persona, where you kind of just have to go with it a little bit, or you kind of just have to compliment him and pump his ego up a little bit to actually get through it, because if you choose the wrong options, it you fail it, which is actually pretty stupid. But there's a couple characters that are really good. One of the characters in your party, we'll just spoil this now. In the real world, everybody in your party is high school student. In the real world, this lady is 86 years old. And so they do a lot of little things with that, where how she's completely tech illiterate.
It's a 500-year-old demon, okay?
But so you and your party communicate with smartphones, and through this thing called Wire, which is kind of a funny play on Line, which is a big messaging service in Japan. And so her icon for it is a picture of her, but it's super blurry. And she also ends every text that she sends to the group with her name. And there's one amazing line in the game where one of the villains that you fight is named #QP. And at one point in the game, she's just yeah, I don't know about this pound sign QP person. I'm oh my god, that's so perfect. So yeah, there's. And the Vocaloid that's on your team, Key, the Greek character for Key, obvious, the Greek X character, obviously.
Oh, Kai.
Key.
We're talking about the X-looking thing, right?
Yeah, it was pronounced Key the entire game, and they make a bunch of key puns with it too. They do the same thing in Kingdom Hearts. So
okay,
that's two. I got 2 games to your probably accurate historical representation.
Does the game have
I'm basing it off scientific use, not historical use.
Did the game have an English dub, or was it Japanese with English text?
Full Japanese with English text.
It could very much be the Japanese pronunciation of it.
Oh yeah, that might be.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is that there's portions in in combat, there's no subtitles for the quips that people are doing in combat, which that
bothers me.
Yeah,
not knowing what's being said. Blaze Blue is not the same when there's only a Japanese option and you don't know what's being said at the start of the match.
I know, right? Can't believe they removed that. Whatever. So the last thing I'll talk about, because I'm the master of the segue, is the ending. So this game, it's got a true ending and a bad ending. just like the first game. And the true ending is terrible because you kind of just like, you do the thing, there's a twist, you beat the final boss, credits. And then you get a little post-game thing where they're like chatting a little bit in the real world over their phones. You just see like a phone interface of the chat. And so there's no like, for a game that is all about these two worlds and how people are different between the two worlds, you don't actually get to see the people, how they are in the real world. And there's like extremely little closure there, which is like, closure's everything in an ending, in my opinion. So that sucked. The bad ending, though, was awesome. The bad ending was really, really good because it gets to a point where you have the option, like the option which gets you the true ending versus the bad ending, is the option where you're like, there's this person and it's like, if you kill this person, you will be able to escape to the real world. And you're like, okay, do we take the easy way out and kill them, or do we try to find another way? And so the bad ending is taking the easy way out. And in doing that, turns out the person that you're killing is actually a character from the first game who like doesn't remember anything from the first game. And when you try and kill them, they remember from the first game, and they were one of the villains in the first game. So they get pissed at what's going on. And then you get into a couple boss fights, and their character theme comes back with like a new version and then another new remix of it. And so that was like the one time of the game that I was super fucking hyped when that happened. I'm like, oh shit, that's an amazing twist that like I'm like glad I did this. So
that sounds like a cool twist, a cool callback to the first game.
Yeah, because
which
like,
you are spoiling because this game is of course not worth playing.
Yeah. And as we get into talking about, game endings, there's going to be spoilers. So, I mean, we'll try to like mention, okay, this is the game that we're going to talk about. So if there's a game that you don't want the ending spoiled, that we're going to talk about here, maybe, pause the game, go play, pause the podcast, go play through that game, then come back and listen, and then you can hear our thoughts. So, there's a bunch of different like ways to end a game. I think like even in these just like overarching types of ending a game, I think some are just categorically worse than others. My least favorite gameplay trope is push button receive ending, where like you get to the end of the game and you have like a choice that determines your ending that might be like slightly based. You might have like more options depending on how you played the game, but still generally like you press button receive ending. Like the Deus Ex reboot did this, where you got to the end and you basically had like 3 or 4 different, like I think you actually literally had like 3 buttons that you could press, or you could just leave, and those were the different endings. And it's like that's so lazy. And
yeah,
isn't it the same for like Mass Effect 3 as well?
Yes, where you literally get to a screen where it's just like it shows you boom, boom, boom endings.
I mean, to be fair, that honestly that sort of feels like Mass Effect in a nutshell.
Yeah, like this is pretty popular in games where they attempt to have like player choice throughout the entire game, but they don't have the balls to be able to lock you into an ending based on your choices. They still let you choose at the end, like, here's a few different options on how the game ends, which one do you want? Which is...
I'd rather be locked in and face the consequences of my actions.
Exactly. Alex mentioned this when we were talking about triangle strategy, where like a game that actually locked you in to stuff, how you played the game, people would fucking hate it. A lot of people, because if they got like an ending that they didn't want.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things where I think visual novels as a genre generally actually kind of do it right more consistently. When they have when they have multiple endings, it's usually it's locked in fairly early on. And I mean, there's some visual novels where even like a seemingly inconsequential early decision locks you into like a certain ending.
Yeah.
Or
just
a
like,
certain path.
Yeah.
That maybe even has other endings, right? Of course, partly that's particular to that sort of genre where they can get away with a
massive amount of asset reuse and either just basic VO or text even to like, put the story together. So it's easier.
Yeah, they don't have to come up with like a entirely different like set piece for like with like a bunch of like a huge big cut scene with like an original level assets for the ending. They can present it through the same engine, maybe with some like still images and stuff.
Yeah,
and I definitely understand from the sort of development aspect and cost aspect of why a lot of games, shy away from that. But when the game does have these multiple sort of options and paths, and they're putting the money into the like asset creation, especially in something like, say a Mass Effect or a Duet,
Deus Ex.
Deus Ex. Like, these are big budget games. Like, you can do it. You have the resources. You were just cowards.
Elden Ring has 6 different endings. 2 of them are unique, and 3 of them are just a slight variation on your basic you beat the game ending.
Mm-hmm. As always, Elden Ring coming in to just shit over every other AAA game in the last like 5 years.
Yeah.
The only game that hyped that's actually lived up.
Not without its problems, but
yeah. And like Triangle Strategy was also like a push button receive ending kind of thing, but something that completely missed my mind when I was talking about that game, which I cannot believe I forgot to mention, was like how like the decisions actually happen in this game, because you don't just like the major decisions that like branch the plot, you don't just choose them from a menu. You have all the members of your party predisposed to various options that you have in front of you, and you have to convince them through dialogue of which way they want to vote. And then depending on how you are able to convince them and how many you're able to convince, that will determine where you go to. I did get into a situation in Triangle Strategy where I wanted to go in one path, but I wasn't able to convince everybody to go that path, so I had to go a different path. And I didn't reload my save. I was like, okay, this is how it happened, let's go.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's cool. And especially with the way that sort of the turn-based strategy, like I'm thinking Fire Emblem, like there's definitely a lot of these, I don't know, are these like on-field conversations, like support conversations?
No.
Okay. Because that would be the way to really like bring that all the way, is like, oh, you have to like make support conversations in a battle that affect your route. That would be like, that would be incredible, frankly.
But like, and your actions on Triangle Strategy when you're in like the little like town exploration kind of phase of the game where you're talking to people and like giving them answers that change like your conviction levels or whatever that you're again not able to see, which is a very good game design. Not sarcastic, that's actually really good. Like at the end of the game, you might not actually be able to convince people to go the route you want. So like that, like by the time I got there, I was able to convince everybody to go the route I wanted to for the most part. So like I have a feeling that probably won't happen unless you really go ham on one route and then change your mind at the very end. But that is like an interesting thing that could potentially happen, where your actions throughout the game will determine what you can do at the end, even if you in theory have this choice. That choice might have been taken away from you. So I think that's pretty good.
It's kind of an interesting way to do it too, to like kind of make the choices available to you dependent on what your sort of party selection and what the individual members of your party actually were doing over the course of the game.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, some games that do their ending based on your gameplay decisions, like one of my favorite games, Ogre Battle, has like 12 unique endings for the Super Nintendo, and those are directly related to certain items that you get, certain characters that you recruit, and overall, if you're a jerk or not, in how you conquer these different maps that you're in. And then that's like, you play the game, you get the ending, and there's not really an indication of why you got that ending, but that's the ending that you get. So, Super Nintendo developers, not cowards. Today, Everybody's trying to please everybody.
Yeah, I mean, back then there was no like corporate board trying to manage their investment of millions of dollars to maximize revenue, right? It was just some
artists got to art.
Yeah.
But another game that I think has like great gameplay ending, kind of they're linked very directly, is Papers, Please, which is a game where you're a border guard for a fictional Eastern European country.
God, I'm not even sure. I didn't even know if that game had an ending. I did not.
It's got multiple endings depending on like what you do, because there's a bunch of different like people that come in that you might want to let them in, you might not want to let them in.
I'm going to be honest. I did not finish Papers, Please because I just got too incensed at the asinine bureaucracy.
I like put it down for a little bit, but I was like super late in the game where there's so much you have to keep track of that I'm like, shit, I can't go back to this because I'm going to like mess it up super hard. But that game, yeah, it's got a ton of different endings. The gameplay directly correlates to what ending you get. And like some of them are pretty funny.
I hate bureaucracy too much to continue playing that game.
Yeah, I know. Then there's like modular endings. Like this is something like Until Dawn, where like there's like a ton of different variables that will like influence, how the ending will go and what like individual things will happen in it. Because like that game said there are technically like 265 endings or whatever for Until Dawn.
What?
Just based on who's alive at the end or not.
Oh.
So it gets into like combinatorics. And even something like, Fallout New Vegas, which, that kind of has a, kind of pick your ending, which faction do you side with, but it's also, the ending is modular based on how many companions you got and how far along did you get in their stories, and some of the major side quests in the game, what are the ramifications of that. It like almost does like the Animal House thing of this person went on to do this thing after the game ended.
Right.
Yeah.
And like that's a much better way of doing it than something like Deus Ex or Mass Effect 3. I don't like Fallout, but that's still a better way of ending the game than these just like push button receive ending kind of stuff, where like you actually like, okay, this is how this character did this. This is how this faction of people did that. So there's one other type of ending that I want to bring up here before I start talking about some of my favorite endings. And that's the ending left up to the player's interpretation. So I remember in high school where we were in English class, and there was this one short story where the entire lead up was like, okay, there's this person who's being forced to fight in this Coliseum for his life because he, was in love with like this noble like person or whatever. And like, did the person survive? Did they go on to have a happy ending or not? It wasn't said in the story. It was left up to the reader's interpretation. That was, a lesson in like, this is how you can write a story. And I remember me, along with some other people in the class, were pissed at that. And then it turns out, then we went into like another story from that author, which was the exact same thing. And it's just like, no, that didn't convince me. I still think it's bullshit. Like, I am interacting with a story so that somebody can tell me a story. If somebody leaves an ending out of it and says, oh, you figure it out, no. I paid for a story and you shortchanged me. This is like when you order delivery and they don't give you a drink. And like, I just think it's a really cheap way of ending the game. I can't think of any games that have done that well. I can only think of games that have done that poorly.
I mean, yeah, I think as a literary technique, I think that like there is a place for that, and like it can be good sometimes, but yeah, I can't say I've ever seen a video game with a sort of left to the player interpretation that's particularly good.
I can think of a few ambiguous endings where it's sort of like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I can only think of one good instance of when this happened, and it's Cowboy Bebop. Did Spike die at the end? It's not explicitly stated. He's probably going to, but that is actually left up to the viewer. And then people got into a bunch of internet debates on whether or not he died at the end, and that's fun.
And and I think something like Cowboy Bebop, that's a good example, right? Because it's like, if you think about like Cowboy Bebop as like a work of art in its entirety, the whole thing is kind of like this melancholic, ambiguous sort of like thing. And it's like the themes that it has about like dealing with, the past and your actions, and like like an ambiguous ending, I think works in that work. It's not like, you don't feel shortchanged because it's just like, what even happened? Like, I'd say that like that whole, even early on, it's sort of like, like you're not. It sort of grapples with these ambiguous themes of like, were my actions actually justified?
Yeah. Are these characters good people or not?
Yeah. And so did he actually live or not? Was Spike a good person or not? Like, these are sort of like the themes that it deals with. It sort of kind of mirrors the ambiguity with its ending. And I think that part of Cowboy Bebop is actually like, if you think Spike was justified in his actions, then he's supposed to live. And if you think he wasn't, he's supposed to die, or something like that. Right?
Yeah. That's kind of the thing that I think they were going for.
I think that's what they were going for as well. And I think that as an artistic technique, they've used the ambiguous ending to sort of explore the themes of the work that it kind of had throughout.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, right? Like, I think in that case, it works. I've never seen a video game do anything like that.
Yeah. Well, in a video game, the sum of your actions, like, you did all those actions. There is no ambiguity there. The game knows exactly what you did the entire time you did it.
Yeah. Closest thing, I mean, games in general, there have been games that try to grapple with the fact that as the player in a video game, your actions are totally divorced from like your normal morality. And I'm not going to say any of them have done a great job of actually exploring this idea. Like, there's games like Hotline Miami, which is an ultra-violence, like, neon nightmare, I guess. And there's a part where it tries to, I mean, really the whole game's sort of trying to do this, where it's trying to be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? With its story, but
it's still making you go through those areas and kill a bunch of people super violently.
Yeah, and it forces you to do it, right? Like, it doesn't give you another option. And I think there's like an Easter egg thing where there's these two characters that like just mock you for it. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous, right? I like Hotline Miami, but mostly because like the gameplay is great and
the soundtrack's incredible.
It's got a bumping soundtrack.
I've still got to play 2.
Yeah, like the game is really good, and I think that actually its attempts to do this sort of like reflective, like, oh, the player's a bad person sort of bullshit, it actually is its probably worst aspect, because it doesn't come across well at all, and early on you don't really know what it's doing with it, and it's sort of just like the character is like sort of this ambiguous, like the character's like a weird, like awful murderer. But then, later in the game, it like tries to direct that at the player, and it's like, it doesn't really. I don't think it lands. I don't think it lands well, personally. But whatever. And then the only another game that comes to mind for like sort of having this attempt at the sort of like questionable video game morality. What have you done to the NPCs? And then this affects the ending, and it's sort of ambiguous. Is like Spec Ops: The Line, and,
right? Yeah.
And basically, it tries to say that, oh, you are an awful person, you chose this, you did this. And I think that if you played the game in a very particular way and and you didn't think about it at all, and you are surprised by the ending, that it can hit for some people. But the game absolutely railroads you into making all of those choices. And if you even think a little bit about it, it just comes off as really forced and dumb.
Yeah.
Of course, that game did hit that way for some people, which is why people still talk about Spec Ops: The Line from time to time, is that if you were just expecting a standard COD clone in the desert...
No, this actually tackled subjects civilians.
Yeah, it tried.
Stuff.
Yeah, it did. It did tackle the subjects of civilian death and war, and these sort of ideas of just war crimes and
that they actually exist.
Well, and also that there's sort of it tried to play this sort of line of you did all these things because you're just playing a video game, but the military does these things just as a routine anyway because they dehumanize their enemies and whatnot. And it tried to play this, and it sort of gives this. It has a few different endings, and at least one of them's kind of ambiguous as to whether the protagonist lives or dies. But again, it railroads you into it super hard, and if you see what it's doing, then it comes off really badly. And I think that really that's just a struggle for video games trying that technique anyway. And so, yeah, I think from a perspective as a literary technique, the ambiguous ending can work as a mirror to the sort of ambiguous ethical interpretations of the themes that a work of art explores. But I've never seen a video game do that particularly well.
Yeah.
I've seen, movies and movies, books, and TV shows, they can explore it well sometimes. It's still pretty rare that they do it well because it's a very difficult thing to tackle well, I think, in general.
Yeah.
And video games, because of the affordances of the variety of player actions, it's way more difficult to try and tackle a subject like that using that, sort of literary story technique in a satisfying way. And I've never seen it done well, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's even possible.
Well, that just means that people have to try harder.
They do need to try harder.
And try more. Then maybe I'll be able to eat my words on that, but until then.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, trying to exploit the unique, storytelling techniques that video games have, I still think it's not something that's really been explored particularly well. Closest thing is maybe, again, the sort of choose your own adventure type aspect of storytelling, which probably visual novels explore the best. Mm-hmm. As in terms of the use of the literary devices afforded by that. But
enough to talk about when video games get it wrong. Let's talk a little bit about when video games get it right. So, my personal favorite ending in video game ending in terms of how they did it mechanically is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is amazing because what ending you get is determined by when you beat the game. Because there's so many points in that game where you can go to the final boss and complete it. You can do that almost immediately in the game, which there's Chrono Trigger also had New Game Plus, which allowed you to actually go and see that. And then there's a bunch of different great comedy endings. If you beat it during the specific time when you're supposed to be doing stuff in prehistory, the ending will be the opening to the game, but everybody's a dinosaur. They're great endings. And they're done in the great, tone of that game. And as well, there's certain parts of the proper ending that you get if you beat the game when you're supposed to beat the game, at the end, that are reflections on what you a few of the side quests and stuff that you did in the game. And that, for a Super Nintendo game, again, Chrono Trigger, insanely ahead of its time. It's still the ending still does stuff that, in terms of reflecting what you did in the game, that modern games still don't. which should be a given at this point. But yeah, Chrono Trigger, I think, is one of the best examples of just mechanically how to do endings.
Yeah, how to do like multiple endings in particular in a way that's satisfying, interesting, and like actually adds something to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I love Chrono Trigger's endings because it's probably I can't actually think of like many games, really any others at the moment, where you can just like go see the final boss pretty much whenever you want. From
Breath of the Wild.
I mean,
But like, I don't know how the ending to that game. I've never played it, so I don't know how that changes based on like how many. I know the final boss fight changes on some of the stuff you do in the world, but I don't know if the ending actually changes.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some open world games where you can just go to the final boss, and if you cheese it, you can beat it early. But I've not played one where the ending's actually different depending on when you beat the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Breath of the Wild does not change. It's just, if you go right to the final boss, you just have a gauntlet of all the other bosses you would have had to fight first in the dungeons. You have to fight them first before you get to Ganon.
Okay.
Yeah, they've done that a couple times in Zelda games. I think they did the same, gauntlet thing, and they definitely did it in Skyward Sword, and I feel like they did it in maybe Wind Waker too, actually.
Well, I mean, the boss rush before the final boss, that's an established trope. Chrono Trigger does that.
Yeah, boss rush before the final boss. Yeah, it's true. Chrono Trigger does it too, so... Yeah, the boss rush before the final boss is classic. Especially because then... Actually, you know what? Let's point that out. I like the boss rush before the final boss. Because typically, late game, you have all these like upgrades and extra powers and extra items, and you just destroy these bosses that you struggled with earlier in the game, if it's well designed.
See, I don't like it when they do that. I like it when they do updated versions of the bosses you fought throughout the game. If it's the exact same, like that's what Chrono Trigger does, they're the exact same, then like you just do your one ultimate attack, the boss is dead, you do the windscreen, and then you do like a little like loading or whatever. Not loading, but just like a little bit of time before the next one, and the next one it comes off more as tedious than like a super power trip. Like I'd rather just like new updated versions that like keep the same mechanics of those bosses, but up their stats to a point where they're a bit more appropriately powered for when you are ending the game. I don't know.
I could see that.
So would you prefer like just a dedicated boss rush mode instead of like the boss rush in the story?
Well, I mean, that depends. Like the boss rushes in RPGs, like they get weird because it's all numbers based. Like a boss rush in an action game, like that's much, much different.
Yeah.
I'm thinking more of action games personally, but
yeah, that's fair.
I've been meaning to check out Metroid Dread's boss rush mode that they added.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to remember. I think Cave Story does a bit of a boss rush before the final boss. Maybe not.
No, it doesn't.
Maybe no. You know what? I think I'm just getting confused because you face Balrog again.
Yeah,
but Balrog's different every time. He keeps getting upgraded. Anyway, I like the boss rush, but I think that you're right. Like in some games, especially in an RPG, like it shouldn't be tedious.
Yeah.
It should be like if it's done in a way where it's fun because, especially in an action game and you get to kind of like, oh yeah, I know how to beat this guy, and then it's kind of like fast because you've done it before. If there's a couple new moves, that might be interesting.
Yeah. The Caligula Effect Overdose did that and gave you new remixes of these character themes. It was great.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So
actually another sort of thing to have, there's like just the secret ending. There's a lot of games that just have one regular ending and then one secret ending. And I gotta say, one of my favorites has to be Cave Story. Just like, giving the player an alternate ending for players that have mastered the game and are really good at it, and it's super challenging just as a way to kind of like, test yourself. Like, I like that. Super, especially, I mean, the Cave Story secret ending is just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so good.
Still haven't beaten it.
So challenging. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of games that do that, Sometimes it's not explicitly an ending per se, but there's just like a super hard secret boss.
Yeah.
But I like that, give the players something to kind of work towards.
Like some RPGs like Persona 4, they've got your ending, but then you've got the true ending.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common in RPGs, I'd say, to have like a secret boss. I mean, my favorite RPG, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, it's got a secret boss at the bottom of like the 200 level.
Oh God! Right.
The 200 level like challenge mode. Yeah, pretty common, but I mean, it's super hard secret boss is kind of a video game trope for a reason.
Yep.
Yeah. So any other game endings that you guys like thought were like really interesting or did some novel things?
I like what Nier Automata did.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. I literally have it in my notes here.
I like the way you hit the credits, but then there's still more game. Then you hit the credits again, and then there's still more game. There's actually an ending for each letter of the alphabet.
Yep, 26 endings.
22 of those are joke endings.
Yep.
And you can just get them, like, you can just get accidentally.
Those, yeah. Like, there's this one, like, chip that you have that lets you self-destruct.
Your OS chip.
Yeah. Or, yeah, like, if you want to remove that, it'll...
Because the way you change up your character is, like, you have a bunch of chips that you install, because you're an Android.
Yep.
And, like, there's some in there that are, like the OS chip is mandatory, but you can remove it.
It like prompts you, are you sure? Are you really sure? And then if you do, you get one of the endings. I got an ending where
delete System 32.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
I got an ending where I ate a weird fish.
Yep. The weird fish you got from Jackass.
Yes.
Just RM/all.
Yeah, there's a bunch of joke endings. And, well, I mean, the thing that Nier does that's so awesome is that when the credits part of the game is like a shoot 'em up sequence.
Okay.
And
like Smash Bros.
Yes. But as you're doing it, there's like messages that are coming across the screen and other ships join you. And those are from other players. Now, to get your ship to be in that sequence to join other players and give them a message as well, when you beat the game, you have to delete your save data.
Ooh.
Yeah, you have to, commit to like, okay, this entire game that I played that I might want to go and, go to all the other endings and whatever. No, you got to delete that. You got to commit to, helping the cause.
And it's not the first time Nier does that as well. The first Nier also has the save delete.
Yeah. And so funny thing about Nier Automata is that because you get to add a message to it, I didn't get the option to delete my save data because the message I put was had some strong words in it. So it's just like, if I shit talk Platinum Games, they're not going to give me the opportunity to delete my save and put that in the ending. So I actually had to play like through the ending sequence of that game like multiple times because I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't let me delete my save to do this.
Even prior to that, I just love the whole final sequence of that game.
Mm-hmm. It's like really striking stuff.
Yeah. So another sort of ending type thing. There's a lot of games that like have an aspect of just like 100% completion in order to sometimes get some sort of usually small special ending thing, right? Mm-hmm. Think like a lot of Mario games have like a secret level that you get by 100%ing the game, or actually some Sonic games have that as well.
Yeah, it's like no warps.
Yeah, and like I gotta say, if you have a game where you have like 100 hours of just tedious collectathon shit for the player, please put something small in for the player after that. There's nothing worse than spending an insane amount of time 100%ing a game with a zillion collectibles only to find out that there is literally nothing. But yeah, it doesn't have to be something big, but just, put something in. If I've spent 50 hours solely on finding all these tedious, tiny secret things, it's nice for there to be some small token of yeah, you beat it. Here,
and not just an achievement.
Yeah, not just an achievement.
Unique game part.
If I put in the time to find all 900 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, I want to be rewarded with more than a golden piece of poop.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
My God.
Yeah, that's brutal.
There's a reason I'm never going to get all those seeds.
Yeah. No, a lot of the Mario games these days, have just a secret level. And the only way you unlock it is by getting every single star or every single coin or whatever. And I like that, And they're not even big. Mostly they're just a fairly small level, takes a couple of minutes to go through, and then it's congratulations or something like that, right? Yeah. It's not a big thing. It did not take the developer a lot of development time to put that small thing in, but it's really satisfying as the player to just be yes, I got everything.
Get to go see Yoshi on the roof.
Yeah, Yoshi on the roof, exactly. I think there was one of the 3D Sonic games, I think Sonic Adventure 2, where if you 100% the game, you get Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. And it's in 2.5D or something. And you can just run through it. Did not take them very much time to put that in.
No. But level design's already done.
Yeah, but it's such a cool Easter egg for the players that are going to 100% the game.
Mm-hmm. My favorite game ending, though, and this is mostly just because it's the most batshit ending I've ever seen, is for 999. 9 persons, 9 hours, 9 doors. And I gotta spoil some parts of it. Y'all should go play this game because it's so goddamn good, but I need to talk about this. If not now, when? So the entire game is these puzzles that these puzzle rooms. It's basically an escape room game almost, but with murder. And so at murder and pseudoscience. God, how deep do I want to go? How much time do we have? So I'll try to be as succinct as possible while also being as crazy as possible. So the final puzzle in that game is you communicating with a past version of somebody that you know who died in the past but is communicating with you in the present through the use of something called the morphogenetic field, which is some pseudoscience bullshit. That's we're all communicating with each other subconsciously somehow.
Yeah, that's actually, I think I've heard about that, and it's really funny because it's one of the guys who maybe the guy who patented the MRI, he came up with that, I think.
What?
Yeah, and it's really out there. It's
yes.
It's the crystal structure of the universe repeats patterns, and every time a pattern gets repeated, it's easier to repeat it or something like that. And it affects all levels of everything, and it's physics can rewrite itself if it accidentally rewrites itself enough times. And I'm you lost me.
So yeah, morphogenetic field is really stupid.
It's super out there and makes no sense.
But this game is all about that and how it is real, and they're communicating with different timelines of themselves, so that you can save the person in the past who is a corporeal person in the present somehow, even though they're dead in the past. And so you need to communicate with them so that they can solve a puzzle so that they don't get incinerated.
But they're already dead.
But they're communicating with you then through the morphogenetic field, because how you access the morphogenetic field in this game is based on how much stress and trauma you're going through at the moment. And this person is about to be incinerated, so clearly they're able to do some crazy shit.
All right, then.
And so you need to help them solve Sudoku.
Of course.
The game's called 999, so clearly the final puzzle has to be Sudoku. But oh my god, I fucking fell out of my chair laughing at this part because it's building up. All this crazy plot stuff and all this like super emotional, like the person's crying as they're like, I don't know how to solve this. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then you see the screen and it's a fucking Sudoku puzzle. And it's like, god damn it. I know how to solve Sudoku. And it's not, and because, you know, this is a video game, it's not even a difficult Sudoku. It's mostly solved at this point. It's like, fucking hell.
Wow.
But even beyond that, like the other plot twists in the game about how that person that you're trying to save basically concocted the entire scenario that you're in the present to put you through enough stress that you can communicate back in time to save them so that they can justify their own existence in the future.
Sure.
And the whole thing in the first place, the whole like experiment in the first place was to try to get kidnapped kids to access the morphogenetic field so that a person could research it, because this one person is trying to figure out a way that they can cure their prosopagnosia, which is face blindness, where you cannot differentiate between different people's faces. And so they're like, well, if this field lets you communicate with each other subconsciously, then maybe I can use that to make other people subconsciously project their face into my brain space so that I can actually differentiate people's faces, which is the best motivation I've ever seen for a villain ever. It's so out there. Like, yes, let's kidnap these 9 kids and put them through life-threatening scenarios where, oh shit, one of them actually died in the end. Also, I can differentiate people's faces.
Just because I, didn't want to ask people who they were.
Yep. Then you escape this boat that you think is a boat the entire time, but it's actually just a boat in the desert. And it's all simulated to make you think it's a boat in the water so that you can't, like, just jump through a window.
It's got hydraulics,
Yeah, and parts of it start flooding.
Okay, very important, though. Like, how the hell did he keep the sand down?
I know. It seems impossible. It gets everywhere.
I hate sand.
It's coarse, rough, and irritating.
Yes. Then finally, once you solve the problem, this person's justified their own existence, you escape, and then you go and and then the final shot of the game is you driving down a desert road, and you see somebody hitchhiking. And the person hitchhiking is dressed up as an Egyptian priestess or whatever. And this entire game you're finding notes and talking about this conspiracy where there was this one mummy that was perfectly preserved and didn't decompose at all because they were preserved in Ice 9. Which Ice 9 is a concept from an old from Cat's Cradle, I think. The Kurt Vonnegut book about this ice that won't freeze at room temperature and whatever.
Yeah.
And this entire time it's just the thinking that the player has is that there's just more pseudoscience that they're just bringing up because it's interesting.
Well, and the funny thing there is that so there actually are different types of ice, and I think that at the time that Ice 9. I can't remember if it was Ice 9 or if it was a different one, but it was there was also another sci-fi book about an ice that would actually turn other water molecules into this form of ice.
Yes, that's Cat's Cradle.
Yeah. So it is the one. Yeah. And basically the problem with that is that if any living thing touches it, it just dies.
Yeah.
Right. And is then dead forever because it's more stable. Now, that is not how Ice 9 actually works. It was written before Ice 9 was synthesized, but there is a real Ice 9. But Ice 9's actually not that interesting, it turns out. Most of the other forms of ice are just different crystal geometries. Mm-hmm. And they do have slightly different physical properties because of the different crystal structure, but they're just really finicky, difficult things to create that only can exist in artificial lab conditions.
So not in ancient Egypt.
No.
Right.
Yeah, I believe actually the standard ice that everyone's familiar with is actually Ice 4.
Ooh.
I don't know why the default normal Ice is Ice 4 instead of Ice 1.
Yeah, I would have thought that people would have most been associated with Ice Cubed.
Yeah, well, it turns out Ice Cube is, a very modern development. Didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, he was born in the 20th century.
That's right. Yeah.
What's dry ice classified as?
It's not ice. It's CO2.
Well, shit. Then we got ice that isn't even ice.
I mean, seriously, like dry ice. Okay, dry ice is about as much ice as that pop can. Seriously, they're both like solid. That's about where it ends.
But
It's like, oh man, let me just take a drink out of this, this glass, or should I say, silica ice?
But anyways, so this final shot of this video game that I love is, you find this like lady dressed up as an Egyptian priestess, like hitchhiking, like with her like thumb out, and they don't explain it. That's the last shot. And they don't explain what happened. So it's like the entire time you're thinking this thing is just some like weird bullshit, and then it's just like, wait, what? Who's this? What's going on here? And that person's name, they're a character in the next game, and their name is Alice, All Ice, and they vehemently deny that they are an old that is what happened. That like, no, that's just a rumor. This is just a coincidence. This is just how I dress. No, this is not how it is. But the entire time it's like, are you lying? Are you actually somehow an Egyptian pharaoh that was frozen in time and then somehow like came back in modern day and then learned how to hitchhike?
Yeah, I was going to say, did they have hitchhiking in ancient Egypt?
Frankly, makes about as much sense as the morphogenetic field nonsense.
Exactly, which is why I shouldn't have been surprised when that happened. It clearly foreshadowed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my favorite ending because it's so batshit, and there's a bunch of other weird, crazy stuff that we do not have time, and I do not remember well enough to get into.
I mean, honestly, my favorite game ending, the thing is, it doesn't do anything particularly novel in terms of the mechanics of the ending or anything like that. It's just my favorite game of all time. The ending's also great, so I love it. Which is Homeworld. And it has a great ending because it just, you finish the final mission, you get a nice cutscene, and then you get credits with a banging Yes song. And
yes.
up to that point, like, the game has incredible music, but it's all like this really sort of atmospheric kind of spacey music, or this like sort of interesting sort of tribal drum heavy kind of rock-ish music for the battle music, stuff like that. No vocals at all. And then all of a sudden, totally left field, it just gives you this banger prog rock song from Yes as the credits music. And it was composed specifically for that game.
Nice.
And it's really good. I love that song. It's called The Ladder. But it's really unexpected, actually. But it's so, yeah, it just gives you, a nice credits with some art, because the game has great concept art that they use in the credits and cutscenes a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's just really, really great. I don't know. Just, that's the thing. Sometimes you don't need to do anything particularly fancy. You have the last level, you have a satisfying cutscene that explains the resolution of the story for your, characters, or in that case, like, I guess there's characters kind of, but it's an RTS, so it's more like the characters are more like the civilization that is, recovering its glory kind of thing. And just resolves the story in a nice cutscene, gives you a banging song to end it off, and then there you go. Like, you don't need to do anything crazy. Like, you can just do a straight ending, and if your story was good up to that point, like, there's no branching paths or anything. It's just an RTS with good cutscenes, great story, and good music. It just continues that for the ending. And that's fine, and I love it. This is definitely not a nostalgia trip. Totally not. Couldn't be anything else.
No, it's not. I didn't mention Final Fantasy Tactics once.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, you don't have to do anything super weird and novel and interesting, I think, to have a good ending. You just have to deliver on, like, resolving the things that your narrative brought up in the game and doing it satisfyingly. Not every game has to have multiple endings and, like, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, like getting back to what I was saying about the ending left up to the person's interpretation. Just have a story, write it well, and finish it satisfyingly.
Yeah, like
it's not rocket science.
Like the story in Homeworld is actually incredibly basic. It's really not like doing anything particularly crazy. It's very straightforward. It's just well written and and the voice acting's really good and the music's really good. And that's really like if you deliver on just solid fundamentals, your story and story ending will be leagues above because video games, frankly, the bar is low. The bar is low for story in video games, and I think the bar is low for endings as well, for the same reason, basically.
Mm-hmm. All I really ask is a game which all I really want is characters that I get attached to and I'm satisfied with how it ends for them.
Yeah, like they're in a better place from when they started and whatever.
Yeah. Another thing I guess we didn't really talk about was just like a final boss and like the difficulty thereof. I definitely like a final boss to be like the most difficult part of the game because I think that it should be kind of memorable. And it like if the final boss is not the most difficult boss, it's just kind of weird. It's like, why was this the final boss?
Well, I mean, apart from obviously bonus bosses.
Apart from bonus bosses, yes. But so it should be the most difficult boss. But I don't think like some games, the final boss is like way out of proportion with the difficulty of the rest of the game. And that's not necessarily great. If I beat the whole game and I don't die to a single boss, and then the final boss, I can't beat it all, I feel like the difficulty curve is broken.
Yeah. Just like, this is good, Wall.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't think of examples off the top of my head, but I know there's games where I've beaten everything but the final boss because the curve's just like wrong. So yeah, is that it?
Yeah. Speaking of endings, let's end this podcast.
Let's end this podcast.
If you think this was a satisfying ending to the podcast, you can let us know at angrysunzone@outlook.com or leave us a message on Twitter at angrysunzone. If you think that, this is not the ending you wanted and you want more from us, you can check out our YouTube channel, Angry Sunzone, and our Twitch channel as well, also Angry Sunzone.
Or maybe we'll leave the ending up to the interpretation of the listener, and we'll just end it right here.
That was a special example of what we in the biz call the abrupt ending.
Yes, but this part you're hearing right now, this was like the extra bonus content you got for 100% through the podcast. It's called a stinger in the biz.